Hello, this is LNP's The Huddle. I'm Tim Gross, that's John Walk, and she's Diana Puglisi. Guys, we're halfway through the football season already. Can you believe it?
Regular season.
Yeah, so far. So we're here to pick a couple games, and the first one, we're going to be talking about the Manheim Central Barons, who were 4-0, were on a roll. They hit a little speed bump last week against Cocalico. They lost 28-24. Now they go into E-Town, which has been a pretty decent surprise so far in Section 2. You think the Barons bounce back?
I'll get to that in a second. The reason I say this, I'm more of an Elizabethtown guy because I've seen E-Town play in person the last 2 weeks, so I know a bit more about them than I do about Central. Just a week ago, we were talking about the Barons being this juggernaut back to being a powerhouse. They're no longer so. E-Town the last couple weeks, it's worth taking a look. Back in week 4, they gave up 334 total yards in that 35-21 loss to Cocalico. But the E-Town defense then bounced back last week in the 25-7 win at Solanco. They had 2 fumbles, they picked off a pass, and they also held Solanco to season lows in total yards and rushing yards, which is notable for Solanco because that's all they do is run the ball. I think they only had 6 passing yards, and they were held to season low 189 rushing yards, I should say. Meanwhile, on the offensive side of the ball, E-Town mixed it up. We know that Micah Garber can throw the ball. They're more of a passing offense, and the Bears made more of an emphasis on running the ball last week. And run they did. They went for a season high 100, or I'm sorry, I can't find it here, but they went for a season high in rushing yards. 171 of those came from back Scott Fox, who also put up 2 touchdowns. They're going to need a similar effort, obviously, this Friday. Do I think they have the tools to do it? I'm not too sure because E-Town, they don't have as many tools as Cocalico did last week, just as far as Brandon Brubaker and the quarterback there, Brady Sawyer, and Colton Goodman, I believe, is the other guy. So they had 3 options there. Scott Fox is good, but I don't know if he can put all the responsibility on his back and say, here, carry the load. They do have a balanced offense. I think it'll be a good game. It'll be a close one, but in the end, I think Manheim Central wins it probably by a 2-score margin.
John, I'm going to go with you on this one. I go with Central. I think coming off last week, the way that game ended, they're going to have that in the back of their minds coming into this one. So E-Town is going to give them a challenge, but they're going to come into it. They've got those offensive threats. We know that they can score from running back, quarterback. And as you mentioned before with E-Town with those stats, giving up those yards to Cocalico, an offense that's kind of similar to Manheim Central, I have to give this one to the Barons.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think Manheim Central as a program is really good at bouncing back after a loss. I think they're 4-1 in their last 5 games after a loss. So
it's a good start.
I think they'll be ready to come back in this one. And like Diana said, a tough loss for them last week, coming off a late interception, a controversial call, and when they were driving for a touchdown late in the game. So I think they'll be motivated. Not that they aren't usually, but I think the Barons will pull it back together this week and get a win. Going down to Section 3, Lancaster Catholic. Stellar defensive effort against Trinity a couple weeks ago held the Shamrocks to 10 points. The 2 games since then, they've allowed 78 points to Berks Catholic and Anvil Cleona. They're hosting Elco, which also needs a win at this point. The Elco, 4-game losing streak. Those were some close games they've lost. They're really looking to pull it together and get a win here. How do you think this one plays out?
Yeah, you had mentioned the defense there. I was just looking at the defensive numbers before we came in here. Both teams are giving up an average of more than 300 yards overall a game this season. Lancaster Catholic, last couple of weeks, it seems like their defense, we thought, okay, maybe against Trinity they would get back on track, not so much. So they're going to be evenly defensively, I think is what we're saying. It's notable considering as far as Elco, they've given everybody a tough game. They're 1-4 overall, but their last 3 losses have been in tough games. Margin of defeat, 29-26, 27-21, 13-12. It's a combined 10-point difference. Lancaster Catholic, their 2 wins are by a combined 5-point difference. So what I'm saying there, Elco could easily be 4-1 as much as Lancaster Catholic could be 0-5. I don't know if that means anything. Just thought to throw it out there. But where I'm kind of differing on is looking at the offensive side of the ball. Lancaster Catholic, last week they did put up a season high in rushing yards with 155. Which is good for them. But, we see the other teams like the Cocalicos and the Centrals of the world putting up 300 rushing yards a game, so I'm not sure to put too much stock in their Brian Downey does a good job for Catholic, but he pretty much carries the entire workload there. They're more known as a passing offense, which is fine. But Elco, they're more balanced. They're averaging 161 rushing yards, 133 passing yards, and they've given everybody a tough game. And I think that experience is going to play a factor here. Both these teams need a win if you have any idea of competing for a Section 3 title. If I had to pick, I'm going to go with the Raiders this week.
Well, I'm actually going to go with Lancaster Catholic. I was actually out at their game at Anvil Cleona last week. The first quarter was very rough for them. Fell behind by 21 points. But if you look at the second half stats, the defense kind of picked it up when they allowed one touchdown there in the third quarter. Brian Downey had a rough game trying to pick them up, 4 interceptions in that game. But you look at the other side of it, Christian Swigert running back 119 yards. Downey likes to run it as well. And if you look at Elco's stats, they've given up over 1,000 rushing yards on the season. Mm-hmm. So hopefully they can put something together. I think between the two of them against that rushing defense, I think it would make some ground up.
I'm also going to go with Lancaster Catholic. If you look at, they both played Anvil Cleona recently. I think Lancaster Catholic had 130, 120 more yards of offense against the Little Dutchman than Elco did. So I think that's kind of a good test to see where they relate to each other. I think Catholic's offense can get it going and give Elco's defense fits. Elco's game against Anvil Cleona had the kind of the same feel where Elco spotted Anvil big in the first half and had to kind of push them to come back. So I think if it follows those same patterns, I think Lancaster Catholic pulls out a win here and gets a much-needed win. So those are our picks. Be sure to follow along. If you want to see how they play out, check it out on LancasterOnline.com. We'll have plenty of coverage.